honored to open up the first session of the day. The title of the panel, is Turning Advocacy into Intergenerational Action. Over the past couple of days, we've touched on empathy, we've touched on intersectionality, we've touched on the science behind the climate crisis, we've touched on sharing our emotions, and today we're going to try and bring all of these great ideas that we've had over the past couple of days and channel them into our final outcome here. How to have productive intergenerational conversations and how to turn those conversations into advocacy and meaningful change. So right before I turn it over to my incredible colleague, Nadine Clopton, I'd like to share a couple words about my take on intergenerationality and what that means. So I'd like everyone to pause for a second and think about your own advocacy, your own actions, and the ages of the people you work with. Most of us are youth here. And so I want you to think if you have any elders or any adults in your groups as support or mentors. How intergenerational are your organizations and how intergenerational is your advocacy? In my personal experience, I've come to see that when I go to protests, it's mostly youth. When I'm on social media, it's mostly youth. Youth are the ones that are mobilizing against the climate crisis. And it's not necessarily fair, it's not necessarily just, but that's what the world has come to. But I really do think that there's a capacity for more change if we include the rest of our age groups. The reality, unfortunately, is that youth are not the ones making the decisions, right? Youth are not the ones with the power to shape and shift the policy that needs to be changed. Many adults, many elders, many older people to address this issue will simply tell us that we need to wait, that we're too young to be angry. I'm just going to remind everyone to mute their microphones if they're not saying anything. Thanks all. You know, we're told to wait. I've personally been pushed aside by adults saying that everything will make sense when I'm older or that the problems will sort themselves out later. Evidently, that's not the case. And in reality, I think this response, the response of just wait, it'll get better, is the easiest way for adults and elders to cope with their own stress that they're experiencing because of the climate crisis and the guilt of being in the generations that caused it. Elders and adults experience eco-anxiety, the idea that we are stressed and living in the shared experience of stress and anxiety because of the climate crisis, just like you and I do. We're all subject to the same anxieties. And in the process, many adults and elders will dismiss our voices, whether or not that's their intention. So we must confront our collective eco-anxiety as youth and as adults and as elders. We must discuss it, deal with it, and learn how to manage it. Intergenerational dialogue allows us to center our discussions around our shared emotions and learn from each other's experiences. If we discuss eco-anxiety, that's something that we all share. We can process it together, we can move past it together. And if we can't be the ones making the policy, at least we should make sure that the people who are making the decisions are empathetically connecting with us. We're growing up in the climate crisis. You know, we know what we're talking about. We understand the problems of the world. But our elders and adults also grew up in the climate crisis, maybe at different ages, maybe they started at a different age, but they've also grown up and come to experience the world in a time of a climate crisis. They know more than we might initially think, or we might initially like to think. I've met many elders, some of whom are attending this event today, who are figuring out now that we, the youth, are critical in the fight against the environmental crisis. And we are, of course we are. Many elders have started to guide, not silence our voices, started to share their lived experiences, their successes, their failures, and that's helping us build better tools of change. We can live many lives just by listening to previous generations' stories. The more experiences we understand, the better humans we become. And we can apply the intersectional lens we discussed yesterday to each of these experiences, each of these lives, and come to a greater understanding of the world and its problems. The responsibility to initiate and facilitate intergenerational dialogue doesn't only fall on the elders, however. We as youth have a responsibility to reciprocate the sharing of our emotions, our experiences, our hopes, and most importantly, our failures. We have to be open to hear from the elders if we're to work together on this. Elders have a lifetime of experience that can help us contextualize our struggles in a positive and healthy way, but we need to be receptive. We must listen. You know, we can't continue to approach every elder with anger, as I know I have done in the past. A lot of my activism and advocacy, rather, has come from a place of anger at the climate crisis, anger at the inaction of previous generations, but we can't let that anger cloud our judgment and stop us from making progress by connecting with elders through our shared experience and trauma. We absolutely need mutual respect and cooperation between youth and older generations if we're to figure out how to solve this whole thing. So let's do it, right? Reach out to the elders in your life, ask them for their advice, hear their stories, and try to come to an empathetic understanding that we're all struggling with this crisis and we all ultimately rely on a healthy planet regardless of when we were born and when we might leave from this life. So my incredible colleague Nadine Clopton mentioned yesterday the concept of becoming good ancestors. And I can't express how much this concept resonates with me. It really clicked the switch in my head and made me, change my perspective on the world, because the elders in our lives were once youth. We all know that. We know that back in their days, they lived different experiences, but we have to realize that we're going to be old someday too. We will all become elders. We will all become adults, and we have to act in a way that will make our descendants proud of us. And we have to act in a way that will make us good ancestors to the youth that follow. So open dialogue, build intergenerational connections, and approach elders and adults with compassion and understanding. We're all just trying to make the world a better place. Be a good ancestor, and we just might be able to figure this out. So without any further ado, I will kick it over to Nadine and offer a quick recap of her bio, just for those of you who didn't join us yesterday. So a heart-centered paradigm shifter, Nadine is committed to co-creating a world that places compassion, communities, and ecosystems at the root of positive change. She holds a master's in environmental policy from Lehigh University. Nadine is the founder of Conscious Consulting LLC, serves as a vice president on the Global NGO Executive Committee, an associate with IICRD, an NGO youth representative to the United Nations for Caring and Living as Neighbors, and is co-author of the Global Youth Climate Action Declaration. She's currently co-creating Emergence of Heart, a film project using a feel-to-heal approach to the climate crisis while weaving together critical reflections on identity, whiteness, colonization, gender, and responsibility. So keep in mind what we've discussed now. Try to apply the intersectional lenses we heard from our incredible panelists yesterday to what you're learning today, and prepare to share your thoughts in the pod sessions and breakout rooms we'll be having in the second part of this panel. Over to you, Nadine. Take it away.
Thank you, Vishal, and thank you everyone for being here today. I'm just going to share my screen so that y'all can see my little PowerPoint assistance. All right, let's get in presenter mode. Okay, all right. Hopefully everyone can see this now. Well, good morning. Good afternoon, and welcome to day 4 of the Phoenix Consultation on children and young people's rights to a healthy environment. If you were tuned in yesterday, it's great to see you again. And for those who are just tuning in today, my name is Nadine and I use she, her pronouns. I have been so moved by the momentum and the brilliance of everyone here. Especially all of the youth participants. You all are giving just me such extraordinary hope for a future where our dreams for a more just and sustainable world are realized. And today I'm calling in from the unceded homelands of the Lenni Lenape people in what's currently called Pennsylvania. So please feel free to write in the chat where you are and whose land you're calling in from. And same as yesterday, if you're not sure, that's okay. You can always visit native-land.ca to learn where you are. And so I'd just like to open our session today with a guided meditation. So if I can invite you all to just close your eyes, if that feels comfortable, or to rest your gaze on something in the room with you, and take a nice deep inhale, hold, and exhale, and just find the rhythm of breath that comes most naturally to you. Feel your belly rises with each inhale and falls with each exhale. Notice the air as it moves into your nose and out through your mouth. Feel where the air meets your skin. Is it warm? Is it cold? Is it humid or dry? Is it moving or is it still? Feel your feet resting on Mother Earth as she holds us all here today. Come back home into your body and just invite your muscles, tendons, bones, your jaw, and your mind to soften. Just resting in a state of presence. Remembering your physical self as part of the ecosystem around you. Inhaling air in through your nose and exhaling out through your mouth. Anchor into the rhythm of your breath and feel the shared love and reverence for our Mother Earth as it emanates from each person here today. Allow yourself to welcome the feeling of gratitude for the opportunity to gather together in service to Mother Earth. And remember what brought you here to this consultation. And take time to thank yourself for showing up today. And so I invite you to breathe in, hold, and just invite yourself to bring a smile to your face if you feel called. Exhale, and please join us back on the call in the present moment. And feel free to take a little bit of time to stretch, to move your body, to have a sip of water. I'm going to have a sip of water too. So now that we're all hopefully feeling a little bit more grounded, a key component of climate justice advocacy is resilience. Movements are made up of people. And in today's world, burnout and eco-anxiety are all too common for way too many of us. As young environmental and human rights activists, prioritizing our own personal resilience and well-being is key to sustaining momentum and for continuing to co-create the future we need. Dr. Vandana Shiva, a prominent eco-feminist and food sovereignty activist from India, uses the term compassionate courage to describe this kind of resilient activism that is able to be sustained for long periods of time because it is grounded in love for ourselves, for the planet, and all creatures. A few weeks ago, I spent 24 hours alone in the forest in the mountains of Vermont, inspired by the traditional Homla Chiapa or Vision Quest ceremonies held by Indigenous people here on Turtle Island, and as the capstone of a 6-month pan-cultural purpose discovery program. I went into the woods seeking to connect deeper and to learn from nature. One of my favorite lessons came from the ants. And as I sat, a few ants began to climb onto my foot, and I let them. They were so gentle, and I could hardly feel them as they scurried across my skin. And they got me thinking, to scale, on the face of our planet, we are significantly smaller than the ants seem to us. Yet, when we walk on our Mother Earth, how gently do we walk? Does she feel a gentle touch, or like a stick of dynamite, or a toxic festering wound? The ants are really effective at creating localized communities, working together, and at walking gently on the earth. So how can we seek to learn from them at an individual and a systems level? Every plant, animal, bug, tree, fungi, body of water, and stone has something they can teach us. We simply have to be open to receiving what they have to share And that is where connection to nature, in addition to the rights of nature, is critical to have protected as a fundamental human right. Earth's natural systems are intelligently woven together and delicately balanced. In creating solutions to the climate crisis, there is so much we can learn from nature in how to proceed. Centering the well-being of ecosystems and of Indigenous people, who are the world's most important stewards of Earth's biodiversity, is integral to climate justice. For children to have a healthy right, or to have a right to a healthy environment, we must first recultivate a healthy relationship with the ecosystems of which we are part and with ourselves. So Indigenous wisdom is one of the most powerful tools we have on Earth as humans to meaningfully navigate through the climate crisis and restore a healthy reciprocal relationship with Earth. In neo-colonial societies, as we have discussed throughout the consultation, there are many emergent symptoms of a much larger illness. I believe that that illness is rooted in the colonial ethics of unchecked consumption, extraction, domination, and exploitation of both people and ecosystems. Prominent symptoms of this illness include disconnection from nature, desensitization to harm against both people and planet, and apathy. We have to feel in order to heal the climate crisis. Emotional coherence and the ability to unpack complex emotions such as shame, grief, fear, and more will be a critical step in furthering all other aspects of climate justice. One of the most impactful things I have learned is the grammar of animacy. I came across this term in Robin Wall Kimmerer's amazing book, Braiding Sweetgrass. Hopefully, we all learned about grammar in school, but this kind of grammar is relational and focuses on the world around us as being made up of living beings rather than inanimate, soulless things. The Latin root of the word animate is anima, which means soul. So if we think of water or tree or a rock as inanimate, we are already assuming that it has no soul. Indigenous language structures help us to break down the barriers between us and nature and to sustain activism. This is one of countless reasons why Indigenous people and ways of being should be at the forefront of any advocacy. We are in dire need for a revolution of the heart, to remember our responsibility as a human family to tend to our Mother Earth well, to prioritize emotional development from the classroom to the career space, to remember that we are not separate from nature and we are not separate from each other. Everything is connected. When we live in relationship to nature and to one another, there becomes more of a responsibility to center well-being, to avoid harm, and to protect nature for nature's sake, beyond just being relative to our value of them. So how can we look at all the key parts of a social and political system in order to find the best places to intervene? In order to affect change, whether at the local, regional, national, or international level, you need to be able to map out all the key players involved in any given challenge and in its solution. Social context mapping, inspired by Yale professor Susan Clark, helps us to do this. Key questions guide us to go deeper into a problem and its proposed solution in order to chart the best course forward. Who are the key players? Or another word used for that is stakeholders. What are their values? What strategies are needed to engage different stakeholders? Who has power? And more importantly, who does not? Who has a vested interest in keeping things the same? In your pods, you will be practicing working with these questions to guide your own advocacy. And COVID-19 has made us all that much more acutely aware of public health and how important it is for society. So thinking from a public health perspective, prevention is always emphasized as an important intervention, But how does this apply to tangible actions towards climate justice? Well, I was inspired by the awesome young people in my pod group and got thinking about the importance of preventative care in policy, particularly related to things that we are doing now. So what policies can we put in place now to reduce harm for future generations? Things like electronic waste, mitigation, preventing further harm to ecosystems, and preparing for mass displacement of climate refugees. If we use policy as a form of preventative care, we will spend much less time cleaning up messes caused by current social structures in the future. And one way to address this is to think outside of silos. I particularly like using the example of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Thinking of them as interconnected with one another rather than just as 17 separate parts allows us to intervene in ways that have a bigger potential for sustained, meaningful impact. So on my slides here, you'll see the goals separate. And then this is what happens when you look at them as interconnected. All of a sudden, there's so much opportunity for intervention that solves not one, but almost all of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals at once. Lastly, I would like to encourage you all to reframe reform as reimagination. Policy change doesn't just happen when you're dealing with policymakers. It's also a cultural shift that happens in classrooms, around dinner tables with extended family who you don't agree with, and in community. When dreaming up the future that we want, if we can transform difficult conversations about polarizing topics into opportunities to imagine something from the ground up together, we can be one step closer to the future we deserve. Thank you for taking the time throughout these past 4 days to be present for this consultation. It's been such an honor to get to spend time with you here and to get to hear from the incredible young people from the US, Canada, and Mexico. So without further ado, I will turn things back over to my dear colleague Vishal to lead us into the breakout sessions.
Nadine, and wow, what an incredible presentation. Thank you so much. It's crazy how far we've come from nature as an entire human species. I was just thinking about how few times I've been outside just into my backyard in the past couple of days and in the past couple of months, even in the past couple of years. So thank you for that and showing us how interconnected things are, because they really are. And I think that goes right in hand with what we were mentioning about intersectionality yesterday, right? Everything's a web, and how we view the webs, we got to look at it through a branching webbing perspective. So thanks so much.